When I'm making cards and I need a title, I very often have to use one die to make one title. Now, of course, this can be frustrating if you need to make many different cards. So I'm going to show you how to set it up in Design Space to make many different card titles in one go. My name is Kelly, and let's get clacking. And we're going to start off in Design Space on the home page, and we're going to click on New Project. And first off, we're going to start off by adding a shape to our canvas. So I'm going to click on Shapes on the left-hand side and add a square to my canvas. This is going to serve as the cuttable area on our mat. So whichever mat you're using, you need to make sure that the size of this square is the same as the cuttable area on the mat. Now there has to be a little bit of a gap on all four corners, so you can't just make it a 12 inch by 12 inch or a 30.5 centimeter by 30.5 centimeter area, as that isn't the cuttable area on your mat. And you can make it bigger or smaller by moving the mouse to any one of the four squares on any of the corners, clicking it and dragging it bigger. Or if you want an exact number, which is what we want to do, I'm going to type in a number here in the size column. Now the padlock is on, which means that the aspect ratio is going to be locked, and that means that no matter what number I put in on the width, it'll be the same on the height. So I'm working with a metric system, so I'm going to type in 29.2. You will need to type in whatever number that you see on the screen here, depending on whichever mat you are using and whether you're using the metric or the imperial system. Now this is the area that you have to fill up on your mat, and you can put as many things in this area as you want to. So if you're going to be cutting a title, you can just move this out of the way for now so that we don't have to worry about it for now. And I'm going to add another shape to the canvas, and it'll also be a square. If you're wanting to make just plain rectangular titles like you would for a normal sentiment, whatever the case may be, you can measure your stamps or measure whatever it is that you're wanting to put onto your card and have those measurements fed into Design Space. And you can resize the square in one of two ways, either by hovering over one of the side pieces of the shape, and you'll see my cursor changes to a black arrow with up and down arrows on it, and you can click that and drag it up or down to shorten or lengthen your rectangle, and you can make it the size that you need it. So this one will be 5 centimeters by 2 centimeters. Or if you want exact measurements, you can type these measurements in here, keeping in mind that if this padlock is locked, then the aspect ratio will be maintained. So if I have to type in 10 on the width, as soon as I press enter on my keyboard, the height will change to roughly 4 centimeters. If you want it to be different sizes, so if you want it to be 10 centimeters wide but 2 centimeters high, you can click on that little padlock and it will unlock. And then you'll be able to type in the height, 2 centimeters, and press enter. And there we have our 10 centimeter by 2 centimeter sentiment title strip. Now, if you want to make many of them, what you can do is you can click on the sentiment strip, right click, and click duplicate. And you can duplicate this as many times as you need, depending on how many you're wanting to fill up on your sheet. So now I want to select both of them to duplicate 2 of them, because it'll be much quicker to duplicate 2 than it will be to duplicate 1. So I'm going to click on the canvas and hold the mouse button down while moving it over the 2 shapes. And when I release it, they will both be selected. So I'm going to right click and then duplicate that as well. And now we have 4 sentiment strips. So I can continue to do this exact method until I have lots of sentiment strips. And there we go. We have now lots of sentiment strips that would have taken quite a long time to cut on our Cuttlebug. And before I duplicate it again, I'm going to select them all again, align left. So they're all lined up on the left-hand side. If you want to make a little bit less space in between the strips themselves, we can just move this bottom one up so that it overlaps the bottom one a little bit. And there is method to my madness, so bear with me. We're going to select them all again. We're going to click Align, and then we're going to distribute vertically. So it will put an even space in between each of the strips so that we don't have to worry about there being too much space or too little space between the one and the other. They are now all perfectly even. When we select all of them, it'll also tell us the width and the height of all of the objects that we have selected. So we have 10 centimeters by 17.49. And we have 8 strips selected. So if we wanted to make some more, we could then just right click and duplicate that again. We could put them next to each other. We could add some more underneath it. But I want to start filling up the space on our mat. So I'm going to select our big square and drag it all the way into the top left corner. Then I'm going to click away on the canvas so that I don't have anything selected. And I'm going to select each one of these elements here. So I'm holding in Shift on my keyboard and I'm clicking on them on the canvas. And I'm going to drag these also to the top left-hand corner, because then they align with the top and they align with the side without me having to worry about any of them. It's the best way to optimize the use of space on our mats, and I love this method. And I'm going to do the same with the next set. So I'm going to hold down Shift on my keyboard and select each little block. And now this one, you won't be able to pull it all the way to the left, but we should be able to see that there is a little bit of a gap in between those two there. If you are finding this video helpful, please give it a like and leave a comment to let me know what is your least favorite part of card making. Maybe I can make that a little bit better. And now let's get on to the video. We won't be able to get a third one in because our main block is 29.2 centimeters. So what we can do is we can probably select a few, right click, duplicate. And now we've got about 3 there, and we can rotate them so that instead of sitting horizontally, they then sit vertically. And you can do this again in 2 ways. So instead of having the arrows making the shape bigger or smaller, if we move the mouse just a little bit further away, you see how it changes to a rounded arrow. That means that you can change the orientation of your item. We're going to move the mouse so that it can rotate. Click down, and I'm going to hold Shift on my keyboard as well, because you'll notice that then it jumps in very even numbers. So now we don't have to worry about getting it perfectly 90 degrees. It'll automatically snap to 90 degrees for us. And then we can move that up there and bring it towards the end. I can probably get one more rectangle in there, so I'm going to just duplicate that one. And we can have 4 there. I am going to zoom in to make sure that it's not going over that end line over there. And if I feel that it's a little bit too close, I might just use my left key on my keyboard to just nudge it a little bit to the left. Now I'm going to zoom out to my canvas so that I can see the entire block. And I'm going to select all of those and right click, duplicate. And I won't be able to duplicate a second set there, but I will be able to duplicate some more of these. And I am using a shortcut on my keyboard, which is Control D, just to duplicate them so that I don't have to right click and duplicate every time. If that's all the titles that you want to make, that's quite literally as simple as what you can do it. We can go a lot more complicated and try and fill up that last little space there, but we like to make cards, so I'm pretty sure that that space won't go to waste. So the next step now is to hide this square, the big square that we have. So we can pull it away from our titles that we have created. And when you hover over the layer in the Layers panel, you can click the little eye. And what that does is it hides that layer. So you don't actually even need to move it away from the titles. You can just hover over the layer and click the little icon, and then it will disappear. Next, we need to make sure that everything is going to stay in that location on the cutting mats. because if we have to click Make It to send it to our machine to cut, Cricut Design Space tries to be helpful and they reorganize everything on the cutting mat, which is not very helpful. So we need to tell it what we wanted to do. So we're going to select everything on our mat. We're going to right click and then attach. And then we can load our paper onto our mat and cut it in our machines. Next, we send it to the machine by clicking Make It, like I mentioned earlier, and turning on our machine. Once our machine is on, and we have our material load type set to on mat, because we are cutting paper, we have to cut it on a mat. And our material size is set to 30.5 by 30.5 and not the bigger mat. We're going to click Continue in the bottom right-hand corner. It will then use Bluetooth or your cable to connect to your machine, and once it does, it will allow you to select your material that you're going to be cutting. Each material has a different pressure, so you need to make sure that you've done your test cuts before cutting these, as we don't want to waste an entire 12 by 12 of cardstock. I'm going to be using the medium cardstock setting, as that is the exact cardstock weight that I'm going to be using, the 216 GSM cardstock, which is just standard AC cardstock. It's what I use for pretty much everything, and there will be a link in the description to that, as well as the other tools that I'm using in this video. And now all we do is we load our cardstock onto our mat. I'm going to be using the green mat, so we need to remove the protective sheeting from the mat. Take our brayer, bray our cardstock down very well onto that mat to make sure that it sticks. And if you don't have a brayer and you do a lot of paper crafting, I would highly suggest you get one because it is one of my favorite tools. We then load the cardstock into the machine by pressing the load button. Start the cut by pressing the play button and wait for it to cut. Once it has finished cutting, please make sure to check that it has cut through before you unload your mat. So don't press the unload button yet. Take your weeding tool or just lift up the cardstock from the bottom of the mat to see that it has actually cut correctly. And if you find that it has, then you can unload. If it hasn't cut correctly, click play to send it to cut again, as it'll cut in almost exactly the same place, and then you won't have wasted an entire 12 by 12 of cardstock. I really hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you want to learn more about making titles for your cards with your Cricut, check this video out here. Subscribe for more Cricut tutorials in the future, and remember, be kind to someone today. See you soon!